G'day expats and welcome to another episode of Expat Chat, episode 120 today. And today we'll be talking about the difference between an expat financial planner and an expat accountant. As always, joined by mate from the Gold Coast, Mr. Managing Director for the Asia Pacific region, Mr. James Ridley. G'day, mate.
Good morning, Brett. Thank you for having me, as always. And those that are tuning in on I'm trying to think, you're on my left-hand side or my right-hand side, whatever you're looking at on YouTube. But we do have the founding director, managing director of Atlas Wealth Management for the Europe and Middle East Africa region. Brett, my good friend, business partner, mentor. What a great topic to talk
Header
about
of
today.
camels.
Because, yeah, I think, header of camels, yeah, just about. But the topic today, I mean, hang on, before we jump in, it's a great topic because there is confusion. Those who have never engaged a financial planner think that's what an accountant does, provides financial advice, but very different. And it all like very different from a regulatory point of view, the qualifications. If you want to get super granular, what they can actually say to you, which is covered under their PI insurance. Oh, so why don't you get the jingle and the disclaimer out of the way, and then we'll jump into it, mate.
All the information we're going to share with the good folks on the call today is for informational purposes only. Please do not construe this as personal advice. If you do need to get personal advice, speak to a specialist like Atlas.
Sounds good, man. And jumping into it. So an expat financial planner versus an expat accountant. I mean, they are very different, and the type of advice that they can provide is always going to be very different. Yet there is still confusion. I'll admit, sometimes people think I'm an accountant, but I'm not. But maybe, again, the confusion comes from, what does a financial planner do versus what does an accountant do? I mean, when you're thinking about an accountant, just tie it to tax, tie it to strategic tax advice around, and it's usually around short-term things. They're looking probably at the next, I would say, 12 months, what's coming up as the tax year finishes. What should we be working on? What should we be making sure we're done from tax deductions, employing little tax strategies, whether you're a business owner, taking care of tax compliance, so lodging your tax return on time. If you've become a non-resident recently, making sure that's done correctly. And then as well as taking care of the tax compliance, really good expat accountants will also help you do private rulings because an expat is going to accumulate very unique overseas pensions or accounts, other things tied to their employment. And when they come back, they are going to have to know how those get treated through the support of an accountant and ideally the support of an expat financial planner that's going to lay the strategy on that. Go, hang on, we know how it's treated from a tax point of view. This is how we're going to get it back home because it's going to be the most tax efficient, and this is what other vehicle we're going to put it back into Australia. I'm going on a tangent, but I'm just getting it started.
Yep. And look, you can, people out there can blame the government like we all like to do because they have made this very convoluted. So years gone by, I've been doing this for maybe 27 years now. Early days, accountants had an exemption to be able to provide financial advice, but advisors couldn't provide tax advice. So Canberra, in their infinite wisdom, decided to really confuse things and just lay things out. So then they said, we're going to demarcate the advice. So if it's tax returns and all those things that James talked about, only an accountant can talk about that. If it's financial products and financial advice, only a financial planner can talk about that. In order for an accountant to talk about financial advice, they have to get what's called an Australian Financial Services License, which is what we hold. Now, obviously, Atlas has two arms. We have the tax arm and the financial planning arm, so we can speak to both very well because they are virtually separate entities, separate licenses, separate everything. When it comes to providing, say, someone needs to get advice on whether to contribute to super, whether to move their super, whether to invest money, an accountant cannot actually provide that advice. They can provide the advice on the tax deductibility of the contribution to super, but that's it. That they're quarantined there unless they have an AFSL. And this is one of the reasons why we have the two arms. Go for it, mate.
I've got to interject. What you just talked about then, holy shit. I've been CC'd in on so many emails from different Australian accounts, and they've got no clue. But I will see them recommending, hey, you need to chuck this amount into your super and claim it as a tax deduction. And then I say, hey, don't do that because your balance is over 500,000 and you're not eligible for a catch-up. Or, hey, you do that, that's going to cause these other issues from a tax point of view. Hey, you've actually had an employer paying you your concessional contributions all year. Don't do that. That's a stupid strategy. You're going to pay more tax than you need to. So you will see some accountants giving free financial advice, I guess, to some of their clients in email chains. But just remember that they haven't done the study to provide, I suppose, that kind of advice. They're likely not aware of the actual ramifications, what that might cause. I have no doubt they are trying to do it from obviously the best perspective, trying to think of, laying it from a tax point of view, but they're not taking into even account your own personal financial situation. What's that going to mean if you put away, say, 25,000 into your super and you don't have access to it anymore? Okay, maybe you get a tax deduction, but then you're like, shit, I've just, ruined my cash flow for the next 3 or 4 months because of what my accountant told me to do, without consideration for your own personal financial situation. They won't do that. So that's a really important one. I feel like really good accountants, they look at it from obviously a tax lens. They look at tax strategy year by year. Financial planners are definitely focused on the long term. We're not focused on the next 12 months. We're focused on the first 12 months, but then let's look at it 3 years, 5 years, 10. What's retirement look like for me in 15 years? Well, how do we get to that? Let's reverse engineer it. We know we're going to need X, Y, Z in liquid assets, and we need minimum returns of X, Y, Z. So financial planners are also looking very long term into the future. Now, if you're in your 40s, great. We're going to be looking at when you're retiring, maybe at 60, and then what the next 20 to 30 years look like as well. That's how our brains think. We're problem solvers. You've got an idea what retirement looks like to you? Well, great. Let's solve that problem over the next couple of months.
And to me, what people don't realise as well is financial planners are licensed with the TPV, Tax Practitioners Board, to provide what we call tax financial advice. Yes. So we're able to recommend and provide advice on the tax consequences of a investment financial product, anything relating around that service. So if you want to understand the tax consequences of super, you don't need to go to an accountant, because you can only have half the conversation. He can't talk about super unless he has an AFSL. Whereas you talk to a financial planner, that planner can talk about, is that super fund the best for you, as well as should you contribute to it, and how those contributions should be made. Concessional, non-concessional, catch up, 3-year bring forward rule. There's so many different permutations to it. A good example of what a planner does is, and I'll give you an example for a client that I was working with this week. So she's in KSA, and I know she listens, so she's going to know exactly I'm talking about her. So I'm not even going to say her name, but anyway, g'day. So she works in KSA. She wants to move to Portugal at age 50, and then keep doing her role in Portugal from 50 to 60, while her son goes to to school there, and then retire in Portugal from the age of 60 onwards. So the question she came to me was, how much do I need to leave Saudi with to make this work? And she'd done a rough budget of what she can expect to earn in Portugal, what she'd spend in Portugal, how much she already had in Saudi. And I said, okay, great. The good news is this is all possible. The devil's always in the detail. So let's break it down. And what we worked out is she needs to leave Saudi. She needs to change her monthly savings. She needs to leave Saudi in 2030, which is at 52, not at age 50. Then she can afford to do Portugal, but then she'll have enough to retire on in Portugal and move somewhere else if need be. So we're able to give very tactile numbers. I actually gave her a monthly budget of what she needs to do between now and 2030 in order to make that part of the dream become a reality. So that's one part of what a financial planner does. And as you said, then it's the day-to-day stuff in terms of what you're investing in, what you're buying and selling. Accountants can't actually do that. They're not licensed with ASIC, who's the main person, to provide investment advice. And
but it's also the risk, if they're providing this kind of financial advice to you, in the event they've accidentally given you, formal financial advice in an email chain, you go and act on it, and it's completely blown up your life with, taxes, or you've obviously opened yourself up to significant legal risk, perhaps. Their PI insurance doesn't cover them for providing financial advice. So even if you went to sue that accountant, they can't claim on their PI insurance because they're not licensed to provide financial advice. So
nor is their PI insurance international either.
Exactly. So you just need to be careful. And And I like how I mean, you sort of, it's a good analogy there. If anyone's seen that movie, Moneyball, when they talk about getting it down to one number, and that's a really good example of that one number. That's the monthly number we need for the budget, and this is all going to make sense, and it's all going to work by the time 2032. Anyway, always love digressing, you know me.
I go to the rabbit hole, but I think, look, I think, to me, if someone's out there in expat land and they're trying to make decisions, they need to ask what the decision-making process is. Is it one part, two part, or three part? If it's like, I haven't done my tax returns in Australia for the last 3 years, no brainer, go to an accountant. Make sure you work with an accountant who has experience in expat side. We had a case about 6 months ago where an accountant in Australia was lodging resident returns instead of non-resident returns, just because he thought that was a safe way to be. It's just ridiculous. Number two, if it relates to finances, and the tax considerations with that, you go to a financial planner. And if it's a combination of everything, then you need to work with a firm that does both and talks to each other. That's the biggest, most important part. And last of all, overarching all this is work with someone who has experience in the expat side. I cannot tell you how many arguments I've had with accountants on the great topic that we always go on about, SMSFs, and these accountants get on there and they've actually said, I've been doing this for 30 years, what do you know? And I say, I've been doing it for 27 years, I'm just behind you, not too much, but doing expat stuff for 18 years. How about yourself? And they go, oh, well, I haven't got quite that experience. And then, accountants are brilliant. They do domestic work phenomenally well. And I've got the highest regard for accountants. A lot of mates and friends and colleagues are accountants. But when it comes to the expat side, and it's the financial planning side as well too. I had a case where a client was working with an existing planner, wasn't sure whether to come across to us. And, I said to this person, chuck us both on a call, ask us questions, make it an interview. And the client loved that. So we jumped on there and I'm sitting on the left side of the screen, he's sitting on the right. And the client started asking their existing advisor questions that I already asked the client about, so they knew the concept of the expat stuff. And by the end of the call, he's like, you know what, just go to Brett. So that's the thing. It's people will sometimes tell you what they think you want to hear to make you feel good and do the right thing. And 9 times out of 10, it's all good intent. But from our point of view, being selfish, I don't care about good intent. I care about outcomes. And just because someone had a good intent, which leads to a poor outcome for a client, to me, that's not an excuse. So that's what we thought. Today's a good call because we are seeing a lot of confusion in this space of whether I work with an accountant or a financial planner. To be honest with you, most expats should be work with a holy trinity: accountant, financial planner, mortgage broker. Pure and simple. And they should be match fit on the expat side. If they're not match fit, you got to get an abridged result. It's not going to be 100%, it might be a good 70.
Yeah, 100%. And there's so many examples that you can use there. That's a really good one about the financial planner. Another good one on the mortgage broking side. I've had a client that went back and used their old mortgage broker when they were living in Australia, was told that they can't actually get any finance for them. No lender will look at them, and then hand them over to the mortgage broking team. 3 different options straight away. So that's a really good example based on having some experience or next to no experience and having a lot of experience. I think accountants is a really important one, and it's something that Ben would see all the time with his team. Deemed disposal when you first leave. A lot of the domestic accounts that don't do it day in and day out, they forget about it, they don't know about it, it's not even on their mind when they're declaring non-residency. And then 2 or 3 years later, it's like, shit, that should have been done, because now you've got a bloated capital gain, which is taxable. Non-resident tax rates, which, they're still, now they've come down from 32.5% to 30% on the first tier, but it's still not good enough. You could have paid maybe next to no tax, and now you have to pay tax because that inexperienced accountant just didn't have probably the acumen to say, hey, listen, I think you should maybe go and have a chat to these guys or this firm, whatever it might be.
Well, they're not match fit. They're not match fit. It's not a conscious thought for them, whereas that's the first thing we go to. And I think a lot of these things come back to being match fit in these scenarios. I mean, someone could come to me or you and talk about eligibility for this age pension. We don't do it. We're licensed for it, but we don't do it. So, you can talk to 1,000 financial planners in Australia about it and they would know about it.
No, that's true.
For it, but I don't do it.
Very true.
And I
Yeah.
think staying in your lane is the most important part. And when you talk to someone, you really have to vet them in terms of the
Yeah.
scope.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want is a whoops moment as an expat.
That's absolutely right. Within each profession, there are specialists, and then there's specialists underneath them. So, I mean, our industry, expat financial planning, that's a specialty.
Mm.
Within expat financial planning, there's even niches under that, which, under our firm, we are lucky that we all cover, which is great. The greatest example right now is the US. That's a minefield at all. Brett's done it the longest. I've done it the second longest, and it is an absolute minefield. So you just need to make sure that you're working with the right firm that has the specialty. You're very fortunate if it's a firm that obviously has those synergies with, I suppose, an accounting firm or a mortgage broking firm, but just making sure they are match fit.
And I think the final point we'll finish this up on is when you're engaging a professional, you should not be paying for them to research. You should be paying for their experience. You talk to an expat financial planner, a mortgage broker, an accountant. As you're talking, they're already formulating things. You're paying for their answer. As opposed to someone who doesn't do this that frequently, they're going to go away and they're going to research stuff. And will they put it together? Yeah, they'll get an 80% result. But you're paying for them to go away and research, which is wrong. You should be paying for experience. You should be paying for bum and seat time, people who sat at the coalface with many expats and had many scenarios that they can draw upon and make sure that everything is optimized for you to that nth degree.
Oh, absolutely. I love sitting down with an Australian or a bunch of Aussies that have been overseas for a while or have just moved, and they lay out their situation and immediately just identifying, okay, I know the problems that you have, but you haven't told me yet, but I know they're coming. So let's get to them. It's like, great, I know how to solve that. This is an example of that. And I had a call only yesterday where they're repatriating back from the US, retirement accounts, they've got green cards. They're talking about, do we go US citizenship? Do we not? It's a really good question. There's going to be a huge tax event, though, if they actually go down the pathway of getting US citizenship. There's an opportunity to not worry about the exit tax as well. They wouldn't know that without the call, but now we've got to lay out the strategy around that. How do we navigate that space? Because it is complex over the next 3 years.
Right, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. So, and I think we wrap it up there with I think people are informed, in terms of who they should use. It really comes back to you vetting the person, you vetting the company in terms of their structure, their licensing, what they can and can't talk about. That's the most important part. You don't want to have half the conversation. You want to have the whole conversation, you want the whole answer.
Absolutely, mate. Should we do a bit of a shout out for some of the upcoming webinars and seminars?
Yes. So next week, Jeremy has got a after the RBA meeting briefing.
Very timely.
If you're down in the description section below, there's an events page. Click on that. You will see that event coming up on the 25th and 26th. I think he's doing 2 sessions for Europe and Middle East and Africa as well as United States. And then next month, we're dragging you guys to the sandpit. So Jeremy, James, Ben and myself will be touring through Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Riyadh. So very excited about that. I think we're probably the first financial planning / Australian tax organisation to do a seminar in Riyadh. So believe me, it feels like the first because it's not easy. The amount of hoops we're jumping through, regs and licenses and stuff. But anyway, we're there. So we're very excited to kick that off. So once again, those details will be in the events page as well too. So keep an eye on that events page. It's something that we're going to try and keep updated and fresh with new things coming up, whether they're webinars and seminars. So, and then last of all, a bit of housekeeping. Guys, feedback, share, like, comment, rate. These things all help us get information out there. And you might not think it's worth your time, but trust me, the amount of people we talk to, it's over 100 countries now, and we're going to the weirdest and wackiest locations. They're only finding out about us because people have previously rated us and we appear on their feed. So please, by all means, please rate us, please review us. There's a feedback form down below as well. So we love all feedback, good and bad. Tell us we're a bunch of idiots or tell us we're doing good, don't care. We need to know. So, mate, I think we wrap it up there and catch you on episode 121.
No worries. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks, Brett.
Cheers. Thanks very much.